Good evening. Welcome. For many of you, welcome back. This is part 2 of the metaphors. And I know there's some people that had heard about the metaphors and showed up tonight, so appreciate that. I am the Vice President of the World Wisdom Project. Why? No, I'm the Vice President of World Wisdom Projects, and we welcome you here tonight. We are a 501c3, so we survive on your support, your financial support, and inspirational support, so I appreciate that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I think everybody here knows Jim. If you don't know Jim Reed, raise your hand. Jim, I'll let you introduce yourself. Jim? Newbie. A newbie, yeah. Well, Jim's been part of...
Ask the people sitting next to you.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. So Jim's been part of this program, and he was at Religious Ed Studies at John the 23rd for, 42 years. So he's led up this program for a long time. So again, I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then he's going to introduce Maria Cox.
Okay. So, let's see. It's hard to... I have a couple master's degrees, one in theology, in adult education, and in social work. And I worked for the church for 42 years in religious education. And started a private practice part-time, turned into that. And actually, I counted the years up, and I've been doing that for 26 years now, which shocked me. I thought, you're kidding. I know. How could that be? Yeah. And so I have a private practice now, retired from the church stuff, and I've been doing my private practice full-time. And I've gotten introduced to this metaphor through that therapy work, actually. But it applies to everything, so it's been a very energizing thing for me. And Maria and I have sort of teamed up on this, and it's been a really fun thing for us to do together, too. So we're really happy to have you here and share that journey that we've been on together with it. So Maria Cox has 3 grown children, has a master's degree in pastoral ministry, and also a background in theater and drama, too. And has worked, she has a very interesting career. She was she did pastoral campus ministry for the Catholic Church. Then she became a massage therapist for, I think, 11 years or so, 15, until her wrists and hands wore out. And then she got into energy work, and then she got into chaplaincy, which she's been doing ever since for, I don't know how many years that is, 18. Started at Hospice, Pathways Hospice, then at McKee Medical, and now at PVH. So she's well-versed in dealing with people who are in difficulty and death. So she's also been through that. Well, you'll hear about that probably some tonight. Her husband died a year ago Monday. They're a long 35-year marriage or so, and 3 grown children. So she's in the midst of her own process right now. So we're really happy to partner and do this with you tonight. Okay. Let me just do a little review to just kind of get us all on board. Let me just do, you have a handout, and this is just, I'm just going to run through a couple of things that we covered last time on the 25th of January. Basically, I don't have a real technical definition for metaphor. I'm not that interested in the technical side of it. In my world, metaphors are basically a summary of a much longer narrative. All of us live out of an inner narrative about almost everything in our life. Our marriages, our work, our relationships, our health, our all kinds of things, including all the spiritual stuff that we're part of too. We all have stories, inner stories about all those realities. And it's more complicated to try to work with a big story. It's much easier because most of those longer narratives are summarized in what I call a metaphor. It's just a few words or a few images that collapse the whole thing. And it gives you lots of insights into how you're organized around that particular part of your life. The other part of the metaphor thing that's important and why it has particular power, I think, is because it relates to a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. And that part of the brain has this really significant job. Its job is to sort reality for us. Our conscious minds cannot handle probably literally the millions of stimuli just in this one room if they all came in at one time, right? So this part of the brain says, we're going to let you be consciously aware of that. The rest of it, not so much. It's going to go into the unconscious. So it's the sorter of reality. And the metaphor, so that part of our brain, though, needs an instruction from us about what to sort for, basically. What do I let in? What do I let go into the unconscious? And the metaphors that we live with and from inside are one of the primary instructors of the reticular activating system. So it has a big impact on what we allow into our conscious awareness. And what we allow into our conscious awareness has a huge impact on the kind of life we create. And the examples I used at the beginning of last time, so if your metaphor for life is an obstacle course, that's the major instruction. That's a big metaphor through Hall of Life for this guy. It's always sorting for obstacles. So all the good stuff kind of going into the unconscious. So he's living consciously with obstacles all the time. Is that making sense? And the contrasting metaphor was everything is always working out for me. So if your brain is sorting for all the ways your life is working out for me, even when things are not going well in the moment, you think, oh, there's going to be some silver lining in this bad experience. I better be tuned in to paying attention to that. So they're not as attentive to the downside, they're always attending to the upside. And so you create a very different life in that way, okay? And then we told some stories. Maria had just a recent widow when we first started this conversation. And that's how we got interested in this.
Right, so I had that word widow, which I didn't seem to be able to live inside of, and then was given the gift of the letter N, and I decided to become a window. And my art teacher is here tonight, and that was my picture of my window. And then the other image was a very painful image that many people talk to me about, waves of grief. And I'm talking about super destructive tsunami waves. And I felt like I might die from grief if grief was a destructive wave. Everybody kept telling me, are you having a wave of grief? And so I decided to change the metaphor to grief was a beloved teacher. And I had many teachers from the spiritual realm as well as the human experience that then I could picture with me in the grief instead of being dashed against the rocks and destroyed.
I want to point out something about that particular metaphor that'll be important tonight. The first metaphor is a solo metaphor. Do you hear that? She's all by herself. It's a solitary experience.
Right.
The second metaphor is an accompanied experience. It's not a solo experience. There's all this help available. That's a really big thing in most metaphors. That kind of cuts across all kinds of avenues. If you're in this all by yourself, and that's the way your metaphor is sorting, it's very different than if it's sorting for how much help do I have right here, right now in this situation. You create a very different experience. Okay. Then we did some spiritual things, and I told a little story. I have a metaphor for holiness that was part of my growing up experiences in a Catholic church, seminarian for 7 years, and then working professionally for 42 years. And the holiness metaphor that I inherited was way too serious, and it excluded all the joyful things, basically. And so I told a couple stories about meeting a woman in a NLP training I took, whose life intention was to have as much fun as possible. And I thought, oh my, you gotta be kidding. This is way too flimsy to be a life metaphor. But I watched her for 30 days, and she was the brightest light in our whole class, because that's what she was doing. And I thought, there's a lot of value in that. And then I ended up going back to the seminary where I was a student for 7 years, and they had built a new chapel. And the perimeter of the chapel was all these parts of scenes out of the Gospels, basically. And as I looked around, there wasn't a single smiling face in any of that art. And I thought, I think we missed something. The joyful, lighthearted, all that aspect of holiness was not included in my metaphor. And then, let's see, what else?
Well, and partly probably because I was in the thick of grief, I was imagining my metaphors for God, which there are many, and we're going to have a little brainstorming session in a minute to get our metaphors juiced up tonight. And the metaphor that kept me safe and sound, especially over the summer, was that God is a hammock. And I could actually crawl inside of God. I know there are many scriptural references and traditional references of God living inside of us. What I seemed to want and need and be able to feed off of was I could crawl inside of God. And I have a hammock similar, well, I have a couple now because people are giving me hammocks. It's awesome. And the kind where you really can look like a cocoon, which was what Maria Fenty told me all summer long to continue to do, was to cocoon.
And then we talked a little bit about changing metaphors and methods for doing that, making sure they capture what we want, and be positively focused. You can use resources from your past history. If you have really good experiences in your past, you can resurrect those and bring them forward again and re-energize them. And then a couple language patterns, one from NLP and the other from, what was the other one?
Well, one from Ross Fryer,
Yes.
just for this moment now.
Yeah, right.
Because sometimes when introducing a metaphor that you want to play around with, let's say I wanted to play around with God as a hammock, but it felt kind of goofy or kind of irreverent. And Ross Fryer last time gave us the preamble of, just for this moment now, God will be my hammock. So it gives you kind of a permission to play around with things that some part of you might not approve of or think is worthwhile.
Yeah. You don't want to use language that creates resistance. So really affirmative, strong language also evokes resistance in our system. So it kind of blocks things. If you do something that's softer, it's actually more effective. That's the powers in the softness of it, actually. Okay. Now, for tonight, we're going to do this brainstorm first. Because I've talked to several of you, and you guys have been thinking about this since we talked about this last. And we want to capture some of your thoughts and some of your energy around this topic to start. So just to brainstorm. And so these are all the spiritual metaphors that just come to you. One's from the past, one's from the future, ones you hate, ones you like. Other people's things that you've heard, ones from your own traditions, ones that you've made up on your own from your own experience. We just want to get the juices flowing a little bit here. Okay? And Maria's ready to write. So
Ready to go.
Just speak them out loud.
Soft white light.
Soft white light.
Universe.
That's kind of a goofy pen. Try something else. I like purple though. Okay.
Trickster.
Trickster.
Punishing.
Yeah, they don't have to be all good, whatever you've experienced.
One.
One.
Aw.
Playful.
I'm going to go over to our Sufi friends who say divine friend, beloved, and lover. And some more other things too, but go ahead.
Tenderness. Supreme love. Sunshine?
Maria, if you could repeat them, that would be.
Okay.
Well, you don't have to repeat them all now.
Okay. Tenderness, supreme love, sunshine. When you go into your devotionals, do you address the divine with certain names?
Source.
Source?
The place.
The place.
Love.
Love.
Presence. Hound of heavens.
Hound of heaven.
Surrender.
Surrender.
Compassion.
Compassion, and I'm going to add compassionate one. That's in that book, Lois. I think she uses that a lot, a little prayer book. And each prayer starts with a different name for God. Instead of, oh God, or oh Lord, compassionate one is one of my favorites. Buddy? I have a friend who calls God Daddy. Yeah.
Mother.
Wisdom.
Wisdom. Wisdom, Sophia.
Mother.
Greater calls
That could be a prayer all by itself.
Creator of all.
Mother. Mother.
Abba.
Abba.
Holy One.
Holy One. Pardon me?
Say it again.
Love.
Beloved.
Beloved.
Helper.
Helper.
Second chances.
Life force.
Life. Life force.
Security.
In that one chant we sing, May the long time sun.
Is what will be.
Spirit.
Sustainer.
Sustainer. Oh, that's a relieving word, isn't it?
Sovereign.
Okay, S-O-V-E-R. E-I. G-N, thank you.
Artist.
Artist. Those John Michael Talbot songs, the Master Painter. Remember that?
One truth.
One truth.
Ruler.
Ruler.
Refuge.
Refuge. Oh, another good one.
Another bird.
Say it again.
Mother bird.
Mother bird.
Living water.
Living water. Jim Reed likes that one.
I am.
I am.
Source and substance of all matters.
Source and substance of all that is.
Everlasting.
Everlasting. Eternal one. Okay.
Inconsistent. Inconsistent.
Inconsistent? Okay.
Yeah.
Infinity.
Infinity? Is that right?
Infinity.
Mm. It just feels good to have those names in the room. A litany of names.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So if you look at the second page of your handout, one of the things that we decided to do was to have a single visual image to kind of, this is such a big topic, it's gigantic, of course, and it's nice to have a little organizing vision that we can kind of bring things back to and out of, kind of back and forth. And so this is a little image that I used at John 23rd a lot, both with parents and my fourth grade class around the Eucharist, actually. This is a single, based on a single verse from the book of Revelation that it's on right there next to the image. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will come in and dine with you, and you will dine with me. And so when you look at that, and you can put any figure you want where Jesus is, whatever is the divine for you can go there, okay? It's just a way to begin to evoke questions and then bring them back. And one of the things that this has evoked a lot in me is the question of who's on the other side of the door. Okay, who's on the other side of that door? And when you ask that, then right away for me it comes up as, is it safe to open the door? Do I want to open it? First of all, is it safe? And then secondly, is it desirable? You know, and that really gets at some of the metaphors that we have for what's on the other side of the door. Do those metaphors portray something that is safe and something that's desirable? And we're just going to explore that first, and then we have two other conversations we'll be doing with this too. So when I asked my fourth grade class about this, a lot of them were more interested in having their favorite rock star or their athletic friend or hero be on the other side of the door. They weren't so interested in, because their ideas about who God is or who this divine is or who even Jesus is they weren't very compelling, really. They probably didn't have a lot of experience. So they would much rather have some time with one of those other people. And the ambivalence we have about opening that door, I think, is connected to the metaphors and what they evoke in us. The ones we've been taught, the ones we're still living with. So we want to just explore that. That's just these two categories. Does it feel safe? And is it desirable?
Yeah, I just want to say that except for a couple of things that came up, how about these things on the other side of the door? If they were knocking to come to visit you, would you want to open the door? So this group came up with things that are pretty evolved.
Yeah. You want to do your little mean story?
Should I do it now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I meet with a lot of people in the hospital who are explaining to me their image of the divine. And sometimes I hear a lot of these things, and sometimes I don't. And in fact, I will tell you that a lot of people describe that guy. They tell me things like, when some young person is dying, well, God must have needed him more than I do. And to me, that sounds like a terrorist who would come and, heap burdens on you and heap cancer on you because he had a different idea. They will also say, God must have a really good reason for all my suffering. And again, that sounds like God is an inflictor of evil. Did we have anything like that? Trickster is different than inflictor of evil, shall we say.
Yeah, inconsistent.
Inconsistent, punishing. That's right. And people will say to me, I must have done something wrong because look at how mad God is at me. So I cannot imagine them wanting to open the door. Right.
So let me share a story from my practice. Sometimes I'm working with couples, I teach them this little pattern from the HeartMath Institute of helping them move from a negative to a positive state. And part of that is identifying some positive resource in their past history, some really good experience where they felt really powerful or happy or loved or anything like that. And I was doing this with this couple a few weeks ago, and the husband had a diving experience, which was very positively intense for him. It was off the coast of Cozumel, and he's a very, very intense guy. He really has a hard time slowing his mind down. And when he got into it, he went down. It was a 40-foot dive down in what he called it, down into the drift, which I think you're just sort of floating with the currents way deep, 40 feet down. And when he identified, it's absolutely still, it's absolutely beautiful. I feel very secure here. And I think all of those natural elements sort of allowed him to get into a different awareness or consciousness, okay? And this was sort of toward the end of this appointment. But he said something, actually towards the end of it, I think there's more to it, because both he and his wife were pretty active Christians. And he alluded to something about it. He also said, I cried in this experience underwater because it was so overwhelming to me. So when they came back for the next appointment, I asked him, I said, you seem to allude to the fact that there was a spiritual quality also to that experience 40 feet under. And he said there was. And I said, would you like to go back to that? He said, yes. So I guided him back down, and he got back into the experience. And then I just invited him. I said, if there is a sense of God's presence here, or however he was thinking about it, just rest your awareness on that, and let's just see what happens. So he did that. Okay. And he just stayed there for about 2 minutes or 3 minutes maybe. And then he came out, and then we talked about it. And God was very, very present, very, very real in that moment for him. And I said, one of the things I sometimes do in those situations is suggest the possibility of merging with this presence. And I asked him about that, and he said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And I said, were you afraid of God? And he said, I don't think so. He said, I think it's mostly me. He said, if I was going to merge with God, that would make me very vulnerable. I would have to let go of control. And control is very, very big for me. And I have to be in control because I can't be that vulnerable, because the people I've been vulnerable with and among the human people have always hurt me in some way. So he said, I just could not take that step of actually being that connected to God. And I want you to look for a minute just back at the text of the Holy Card, because one of the dimensions of that, first it is the opening of the door, but the second thing is this, so being aware of the presence, acknowledging the reality of the presence, experiencing that. But the second thing that's part of that single verse is, I will come in and dine with him, and he will dine with me. Or you will dine with me, and I will dine with you. And in the Middle East, this sharing of this meal is a really intimate thing. And that's what that language is capturing. This is not just, we're sitting down and laughing and having, it's really about communion of that. And that's what the merging would be. And so he could do the first part of the experience, but his metaphor didn't allow him to do the second part of the experience. There is a deeper possibility here. Okay, does that make sense to you? So the things that I have encountered, both as in my religious ed work, but also as a therapist, is there's a whole set of things about us that keep the door closed. I don't feel worthy enough. I'm not holy enough. I'm not perfect enough. The things that are in my life are not important enough. God has bigger fish to fry than the things that I need to be talking to him about. And so we don't open the door because of who we are sometimes. Also, because a lot of times there we have the scary images that we've grown up with that are scary, punitive, capricious, perfectionistic, critical, all of those unpredictable qualities that I think, well, which was what was going on, in some way probably, most of us have run into that. The other side of it is we can also have these very positive ones, very positive metaphors. That God is always consistently loving, that he is caring, he's powerful in a positive way, that there's acceptance, there's understanding, all of those things. So what I'd like you to do is just take a minute and think about the metaphors that are actually, I hope you're aware of some of the metaphors that are actually operational for you right now. Does most of you have some awareness of that?
Mm-hmm.
So if you just think about that, safety, benefit too, side of it. Well, how would my life be different if I really opened that door consistently and regularly? Just give that some thought for a few minutes.
Go ahead.
Thinking about the picture,
Yes.
if I can open the door, I can't be open because there's no handle on the other side.
That's right. That's right. We have to do the opening. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's true in all those pictures of that.
Yes, it is. Yeah. The other thing I'm aware of is the first part of it is if you hear my voice, I'll come in. But you have to hear the voice to open the door. And I'm thinking in my life particularly, but I think in probably most of us, we have so much inner noise frequently inside of us, it's really difficult to get quiet enough to hear the voice. And so I think he's always knocking, is my perception anyway. My metaphor is, I don't always live that way, but I think he's always knocking. So anything that's not happening is on my side of the relationship, basically. I'm not available to his constant knocking. And part of it is too urgent, too busy, too much inner noise to hear the voice, to say, oh, he is available right here, right now. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of those things too, but I think that can be one of the things is that, so I'm glad you pointed that out.
That's great.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought that consciously.
right.
Yeah.
I would open that door so fast.
That's what I've been waiting for my whole life. I would open that door.
Okay. And are you opening the door or not?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay. The other thing that, I know we probably should, well, I don't think we'll do that tonight, but how do we open the door? How do each of us open the door? First of all, is hearing. But secondly, what do you do to open the door? That's another probably meeting or time together. But if the metaphors are negative, there's no motivation to. But if they are, then the question is, how do I do it the best? So that would be another whole question. Yeah. You want to talk more about that, Kathy?
I do a lot of meditating,
Mm-hmm.
so I know how to get quiet.
Yes.
Not that I always can get quiet, but
Yes.
I know how to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about this afternoon, my editor had asked for a chapter that I didn't intend to write. And she
Okay.
said,
That's the trickster.
we got all the way through the book and she said, this is great and it's going to be even greater when you write that next chapter. And I thought, oh, what's the next chapter?
What chapter is that?
I don't know what she's talking about.
Yeah.
And so I started it yesterday and it was garbage and I thought, that's not going to work. So I thought, today, before I even sit down to write, I better meditate for 20 minutes and get the Holy Spirit involved here and say, I have no clue what this is supposed to be about, so you're going to have to do this because I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yes.
And I sat down and it wrote itself in about 2 hours. It was pretty much done.
Great.
And it's not too bad, I don't think.
Yes.
I'll have to read it again tomorrow and see
Yes.
what I think, but
Yeah.
that first.
Remember, you didn't write it. so-
I didn't write it. I didn't.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't opened the door for help, it wouldn't have even been possible to get started.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to jump to Hannah's story. Yeah, okay, because this is kind of a lead into that.
Okay, should I find the picture?
Yeah.
'Cause she's
So
so
here's,
cool.
I'm over on conversation 4 in your handout just because of Kathy's comment. Because this is probably one of the most practical pieces of this, for me anyway, is there are times and places that our metaphor excludes God from being present. We get stuck,
Yeah.
and those are the moments that God is really available and wanting to help, but we're not, we can't open the door. It doesn't even dawn on us to open the door frequently. So I had this experience, our granddaughter is now 10, so she was about 1.5 when this experience happened. And is that a picture of her up there? Yes, that's Hannah.
Is she adorable or what?
She's a little older than 1.5 in that picture. But Hannah and I were in our home together, and I was sitting in the living room with her, and we have this little Q-tip box. It's like got a little shelf. Is that there? There's it? Yeah, you got it. Okay. And if you've had kids, you've noticed this, I'm sure. They go through a stage where they're fascinated with opening drawers, taking things out, putting them back, closing the drawer. They're just doing that all over the place. And it's a sort of a brain development thing, but they don't have the part of getting it all back in the right way yet. That's what they're working on. So she's in front of me, opening this little drawer with the Q-tips, taking them all out, and then trying to put them back and close the drawer. She can't, because she puts them in perpendicular rather than parallel. Okay. And she, at that point in her development, had this great, I loved this, she would say, stuck! And she would say it like that. I mean, the whole inner experience of being stuck was so clear in the way she articulated it. I thought, absolutely. And I've been there too. So here's the other thing that's happening. So I'm just observing, and I have this little, I think, divine commentary that's sort of saying, pay attention to this, because I'm teaching you something about my relationship with you because you're getting a little demonstration of it right here, right now. So be alert, okay? And so I offered, well, I'm God in this scenario, and she's me, and I can see she's stuck, and I know exactly what she needs to do, and I'm more than willing to help her do it. It'd be really easy, really easy to do it, but she's stuck, and she's gotten stuck, and she's going to stay stuck, and she's not going to let me help her either. Okay, and God is saying the same thing to me. When you get stuck, I'm always willing to help you, but you don't let me. You don't stop. You don't open the door. You don't listen. You don't do any of that. You just plow ahead over and over and over again. I had another experience probably about this time. And most of my experiences of the Holy aren't auditory, but this one was. I was in a communion line getting ready to go up to communion. And I had this clearest auditory experience of, let me do more. That was the message. And I've been trying to live that ever since. But it has to do with this whole thing about going through life and you hit a snag and you get stuck. You're in a stuck state, which means you're contracted. Physically you're contracted. Emotionally you're contracted. Mentally you're contracted. Spiritually you're contracted in all of those ways. And that's the door closing state that we can go into, obviously. Okay? And so one of the things that I'm trying to learn is to do a different thing with that. Not to just keep going the path I'm on, but just pause. Just stop for a minute. Take a breath. Soften. Because I'm really hardened and I'm stuck. And most of us are. I'm hard. Hard-hearted, that's a big thing in Scripture too, but I'm really contracted and hard. Breathe, soften, and allow my awareness to expand and include that presence, which is always available. Is that making sense? So that's one of the places I think my metaphor has not worked very well. Because I think that's why the voice came. You're over-functioning all the time. And I'm here to accompany you. I'm here for you to open the door. But I'm just so intent on getting it done. And it's a solo kind of metaphor also. It's not an accompanied metaphor. Okay? I don't know if you have an example about one of these. No? Okay. I jumped way out of line of what our plan was. But
That's okay.
Okay.
All right.
So
We can go back.
Okay, that's all right. Can we have a little conversation about that, though, from your own lives? Are there places that are predictably where you get stuck? Nina?
I'm having a little difficulty even with your question, because what it took me half a life to figure out was, it's not safe not to open.
Yes!
It's not
That's
safe
exactly
not
right.
to open the
Yeah,
door.
right. Okay.
That the lesson's coming, whether I open the door or not, and eventually the door's going to blow up the hinges.
It's going to be a better deal.
Yeah.
Right.
It's easier to open it at the beginning. Yeah,
It took me half-
Get it out of the way.
right.
It's so
Yes.
much easier when you just open the door.
Yes, it is. Yes. Good. Well, you've learned that lesson, then.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Good. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you open the door when you get in those stuck points?
I do what I'm told.
So what do you do to hear what you're told?
It's hard to say, it just is. But if I don't listen, if I try and skip a class, I'm going to repeat that class.
Okay.
Whether I like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
That it pays to pay attention from the very beginning.
Yeah. The other thing I think that can be hard, though, is sometimes we're not clued in early. We don't notice that we're getting hardened until we've gotten pretty far into that. And so I think one of the things that I'm sort of trying to pay attention to is to notice really in the early parts of that. And I imagine you have learned to do that, begin to do that. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It beats the alternative.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Right.
Well, my question was around kids, I guess, sort of. Because you said, well, something you said triggered it. And I said, you know, you said, well, we have to at some point, you know, open the door, but I think kids or children, the door is open. And then at some point, through whatever, they realize that maybe it closed, but they didn't know there was ever a door. And so then we have to open the door again. Because we did this metaphor, you helped us with this metaphor, and we reflected with it a lot afterwards, some of the kids, and they were like, well, I just don't get it.
Okay.
They probably have their own native metaphors.
Yeah.
I think something about metaphor
It's
that we
more-
learn in therapy and in chaplaincy is we don't say, hey Nina, here's a metaphor for you. We say, what's coming up for you? And let them develop the metaphor.
Yeah,
Yeah. But they have contracted moments, don't
Sure.
they?
of course.
And that's when I think this other thing would be helpful. When they get contracted, like Hannah was, that they can relax and just tune in. But they have to, I think they have to, the word soften really is a good one for me, because it feels like when we contract, we're just closing doors. And when we're more relaxed and our awareness is more expanded, the doors are open and you can hear or sense that there is all kinds of help available, or there's guidance about something.
I'm remembering that Chris and Francis taught, was it the 4th graders, how to meditate and to have some of those natural skills that many of us didn't learn till we were adults. Our religious traditions didn't teach us those things, but Chris and Francis, you know, did an end around and taught all those kids to be able to soften. And 4th grade was probably a good, wasn't it 4th grade? That was probably a good developmental stage
Right.
to teach the kids.
But it was throughout the program, it wasn't just.
Right, and it wasn't a one-shot.
It was kindergarten.
Yeah.
Right.
Carla, did you have something?
I'm thinking about the word stuck.
Mhm.
And Jim, when you said that word, I thought, that is amazing that your granddaughter had that insight.
Yes.
And I think that that is the first step for kids. They come up with their own word and their own language. And to affirm that of like, she knows she's stuck.
Right.
And what does that feel like?
Mhm.
And what is she wanting to do next? Or sort of guiding with those kinds of questions. But I'm also thinking about the image of Winnie the Pooh and how he ate too much honey
Yes.
and he got stuck in his hole.
Yes.
And Christopher Robin, the Christ figure in that story for me,
Yeah.
came alongside
Right.
and sat down on the outside of that hole
Yeah.
and read a book to Winnie the Pooh until he got thinner.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I think for children, many times it is through like a movie, a book, a character,
Right.
nature.
Mhm.
It's those concrete things because that is what their brain is doing. They're
Yeah.
thinking concretely.
Yes. Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's great. Yes. The back there.
I think for adults, the middle of the night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, is when spirit is most able to connect with you. Because we're kind of coming out of that deep sleep and we're in this weird space of whatever, and that's when I hear the most or get insights out of the blue. I got that flu, bug, whatever that was going around here. It took like a month. And then I was still having like this postnasal drip for the last month and wasn't going away and everything. And in the middle, at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm hearing gluten. Gluten. Gluten and postnasal drip. And I don't know anything about gluten-free. I've tried to stay away from that topic and everything. And it's in the middle of the night. I'm hearing gluten-free and postnasal drip. So, and when I get up in the morning, I Google gluten, issues and stuff, and sure enough, that's
It was God, for sure.
And so now I am really not totally gluten-free, but I'm working at it. And it's making a big difference, but it was like, and I've had more and more of those, little things like that. It's weird, it's not, sometimes I get amazing spiritual messages or whatever, but every once in a while it's just like simple little stuff that's like, just like out of the blue, and there it is in my head. And that's when God or your angels or whoever is talking to you a lot. If you can stay quiet and just be peaceful and pay attention, it'll be amazing the things that come into your head.
Yes, yes.